if any words that I have spoken have commanded attention, that is only because they find an echo in the breasts of those of every land and of every race who love freedom and are the foes of tyranny.
I've often thought that the British people needed him. They felt as if they were on the front lines, just like the soldiers fighting overseas. And they were. They were on the front lines, but who needed who more? Think about this. Did the people need Winston more and his wonderful words of encouragement, those great speeches, his leadership, a little bit of, I gave you a little bit of it here today? Or did Winston need them? I was in my armored car. Hundreds of little Union Jacks had been placed amongst the rubble. As I got out of my car, people began to gather round. First 10 or 20, and suddenly there were 1,000 people around me. All in a great state of agitation and laughter. One would have thought that I brought them some great gift. They touched my clothes. I was quite undermined, and I wept. Isme, who was with me, heard an old woman say, "Look, he's crying. He really cares about us." How were they to know? They were not tears of sorrow, but of wonder and admiration. I have never believed what many people have said, namely, that I inspired a nation, I inspired a world, and it was the British people. And the race dwelling round the globe that had the lion's heart. I had the luck to be called upon to give the roar. And in that speech that day, Winston Churchill talked about another danger. He warned the world that the Soviet Union was going to be an even larger presence and a larger danger if the United States and all of the English-speaking peoples of the world and everyone else involved didn't wake up. And so the United Nations was formed. And Winston was one of the fathers of the United Nations. And in the early 50s, Churchill called for a summit meeting. Said, "President Eisenhower, please meet with the Soviets. This is getting out of hand. Everyone has the nuclear bomb now. You both do. World annihilation is at hand." When I was a child, and some of you here will remember, we had drills where we would hide under our desks in case the Soviets launched a nuclear weapon and it was dropped on our town. Am I right, Carl?
Yes, sir.
It was there.
Drop and down.
Ever-present danger.
Duck and cover.
But it was Winston who, he used to say, it is better to jaw than to war. And there's a lot to be learned from the legacy of Churchill in that he really desired peace, but the only way he knew of making it happen was by telling the truth. That speech, the Iron Curtain speech, as it was named. He said, "From the Stettin to the Baltic, an iron curtain has descended over Europe." And remember the wall? Remember the wall? The Berlin Wall. It was a big wall. And all of Eastern Europe was kept secluded and tyrannized for a good long time, until the early 90s when the wall came down. And if you go to the National Churchill Museum today, you can see a piece of that wall. It's there. It's near St. Louis, Missouri. Not too far, in a very, very small town called Fulton, which is where Churchill gave that speech. He gave it right here in the United States, with President Truman present. Well, it came to me as I was speaking to a group of students at my old school. They would invite me back occasionally to give a speech. And I thought what might be most effective was to simply walk up in front of them and say, never, 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 never give in. And then I sat down. Now, as a matter of fact, this fellow here wrote a book called God and Churchill. And God and Churchill simply echoes what I've said all along.
London is being bombed, you're losing everything.
That destiny and belief in God are one and the same.
We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I will say, it is to wage war by sea, land, and air, with all our might, and with all the strength that God can give us. To wage war against a monstrous tyranny, never surpassed in the dark and lamentable catalogue of human crime.
Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization.
If you believe in a higher power than yourself, why, you can do anything. Perhaps this might say it the best. I hope to be able to say this afternoon to the extended group. It's a little something that I wrote on the occasion of King George VI's passing on the 7th day of February of 1952. I've abridged this to reflect what I felt and still feel about my friend, Jonathan Sands. Please allow me to transport you back to the 29th day of December, 2018. Upon that day, there struck a deep and solemn note in our lives, which, as it resounded far and wide, stilled the clatter of traffic of 21st century life and made countless human beings pause and look around them. A new sense of value took, for the time being, possession of human minds and mortal existence, presented itself. So many at the same moment, in its serenity and in its sorrow, in its splendor and in its pain, in its fortitude and in its suffering.
I prefer, look at it from your
Jonathan Sands was greatly loved by all who knew him and met him. He was respected as a man who carried himself humbly, worthy descendant of his great-grandfather's legacy. The simple dignity of his life, his manly virtues, his sense of duty, his gay charm and happy nature, his example as a son, brother, husband, and as a father in his own extended family circle. All these were aspects of his character, which won the glint of admiration, now here, now there, from innumerable eyes, whose gaze fell upon a man who lived, really lived, each and every moment. The last few weeks of Jonathan's life, his life hanging by a thread from day to day. And he, all the time, cheerful and undaunted, stricken in body, but quite undisturbed and even undefeated in spirit. These have made a profound and enduring impression and should be a help to us all. You see, he was sustained not only by his natural buoyancy, but by the sincerity of his Christian faith. During those last weeks, Jonathan walked with death as if it were a companion, an acquaintance whom he recognized and did not fear. In the end, death came as a friend. Every man or woman who strives to fear God and nothing else in this world should hope to do likewise. In this period of mourning and meditation, amid our cares and toils, let us join together. May our comfort for tonight and strength for the future stem from his bearing and his fortitude. Dearest Jonathan, I shall miss you most dearly. In the quiet moments, I shall remember your passion. I shall remember your smile. I shall remember your love. I shall ever remember. Forever. Jonathan, in your new life, heaven just got happier. No one had written about Churchill's walk with God. Quite the opposite. Many wrote and continue to write. And there is a people love to rewrite history. And there is a certain faction in this world who love to take pieces of what people have said or done and extend them. You know what I'm talking about, guys? They love to make things up, another interpretation. What was he really feeling? What was he really doing? Churchill. You see, Churchill was once asked, well, you don't attend church regularly. Why is that? And he said, well, when I was a child, I would have to go to church 2 to 3 times per day. I feel I built up quite a bank. But Churchill would use words such as Christian civilization. He wrote that, what I just read to you. He wrote that about the king and how important his Christian faith was to him when he died. And he read that to the world over the radio worldwide. How could a man who wasn't a Christian, who was an agnostic, write something from the heart like that? I would posit that that's impossible. All through what strikes me, Carl, about what's happening today is that information moves so quickly, doesn't it? You know, we've got these cell phones and we've got computers. Churchill used to say, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets a chance to put its trousers on.
Look out, tonight.
Post something on Facebook and it goes everywhere, doesn't it? Or Twitter or whatever. Send an email. But you see, go back to that concept of touching the troops. As you're sitting and texting or I know you do it, all of you. As you're doing that, don't forget to put that phone down, to get out from behind that computer and go out and touch somebody. Is there anything you want to talk about it? Person to person. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, if you're in business today, we get going so fast, even faster, I think, than what you guys are experiencing being in school. It gets really fast out there. And you can get lost in how fast it is and all the details we have to keep track of. Now, human brain is an amazing thing, isn't it? I mean, it's the greatest computer that there ever was. However, we can get lost in the details and get lost in what we really should be concentrating on, and that's each other. So, I would just admonish you, and getting back to Carl's question regarding Churchill's agnosticism or Christianity, choose the side of love, because Churchill's greatest quality was his ability to show how he really felt. You ever heard the word magnanimity? It's a big long one. To be magnanimous is basically to not hold a grudge. Any of you ever held a little bit of a grudge? Come on, admit it, you have. I know you have. When somebody does something to you, or they say something about somebody else, or, what are you saying about my mama? No, that's not true. And you're going to look, Winston was the poster child for magnanimity. And I would say that being a Christian means turning the other cheek, making sure that we forgive. You may not forget, because we're human after all, but you must learn to forgive one another. And I would say that the best way of doing that is by telling the truth to begin with, and failing that, because we're all human, you don't always do that. When you do get caught in an uncomfortable situation, fess up and tell it and take ownership. Be honest with yourself, with others. That's what it's all about. That's what Winston did. And to many times, it made him and others uncomfortable. It just did. And you're going to do the same thing. It's tough to be a Christian, isn't it? Hey, I'm Christian. What are you, some kind of weirdo? No, just take a look back. Take a look back at the life of what PricewaterhouseCoopers, a very famous firm throughout the world, who does a survey every single year of CEOs, chief executive officers around the world. And in that survey, they ask the question, who's the leader you most admire? And in 2012, that survey said Winston Churchill, number one. A guy who smoked 8 cigars a day. He drank a little bit. Was kind of overweight. Pretty outspoken. And here, 1,330 of the world's CEOs of the world's largest companies across every political country, culture, voted him. And by the way, he got more votes than the other top 10 combined. What does that say about this man?
What kind of a people do they think we are? Is it possible they do not realize that we shall never cease to persevere against them until they have been taught a lesson which they and the world will never forget? It is a poor heart that never rejoices. And if driven to desperate hazards, he attempts the invasion of the British Isles, as well he may. We shall not flinch